Are we live today? Okay, today.
Notice of non-reelection of a probationary certificated employee. Then, moving on, I'm going to go through the announcement of our meeting protocols. The Board of Trustees encourages public participation during the meeting and requests civility and the use of courteous language. The board does not condone the use of profanity, language, gestures, or other inappropriate behavior, including personal attacks or threats directed towards any meeting participant and or district employee. There will be an opportunity to speak to the Board of Trustees on items not on the agenda during the public comment, item 4.5, as well as opportunities to speak to each item on the agenda when that item comes up for consideration. In the interest of facilitating the conduct of the public's business, members of the public who wish to address the board during the meeting will have specific time limits as follows. If less than 10 members of the public wish to comment on agenda or non-agenda items, the time limit for each public comment will be 3 minutes per person. If 10 or more members of the public wish to comment on agenda or non-agenda items, the time limit for each comment will be 1.5 minutes. A complaint about a specific employee or employees of the district should be made to that employee's immediate supervisor or the school site principal as outlined in our board policy and administrative regulation. Please complete the comment form located in the lobby and we will call on you when it is your turn to speak. This meeting is being audio, video recorded, and will be archived. All right, moving on to our board expectations, item 4.1. Our student board member, Bella, is going to read our board expectations tonight.
The board expectations are prepare all students for life, college, and career, high quality academic opportunities for all students, and support student academic success. Engage in partnerships with families and the community. The school is a welcoming, safe environment that serves as a center of student learning and performing arts. Promoting a sense of community in our schools and surrounding areas. Utilizing effective governance and business practices. Remain open, transparent, and accountable to the community, and serve as an employer of choice with the highest quality teachers and staff.
Thank you, Bella. Board reports. Do you want to start on your end, Bill, or always go the opposite way?
I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll mix it up.
Awesome, yeah, thanks. Good to see everybody. It's like spring is here. It feels like, right? It's 70 degrees out there right now. Had a few things this past week. Some of them are a little self-serving. I went to my daughter Oakmont for tennis last week and got to see a game. I was like really beautiful out for that. It's a great season. Normally past years we've been in the fall, but we moved to the spring with the combined boys and girls. So it's a little, not shorts weather yet, but getting there, right? So we had that, and then went to enjoyed the Oakmont OPC crab feed on Saturday night. Great event, lots of great raffles, and thanks, really the sponsors. That really, I think it was a great turnout, a great fundraiser. On Friday evening, I dropped in at the district scholarship social, and where a lot of our donors were out and recognizing them for all their support. Really good event. The culinary class made all the hors d'oeuvres and the treats, which was really cool, and they're going around serving them. So that was a great event. Thanks for everyone who helped put that together, and definitely to our sponsors. And then got to visit Brad and Rob over at Job Fair on the weekend. Thanks guys for being out there on Saturday. It was a super event over at PCOE's headquarters. Amazing, parking lot was full, so I think a lot of activity, and we get some great recruits out of that. But I think that was it for me. A few things going on, but midterms are here, so for all of our students, good luck and hang in there, get it done.
I was able to do a few things last couple weeks. I hadn't been talking any principals, but I had a great visit over at Wood Creek. I will highlight one class that when you get your visit, try to see an American Sign Language class. I really enjoyed it. The teacher had the class just riveted, silent, other than sometimes some kids were helping each other. And she used combination of slides, hand motions, and writing on the board. My language is deaf, which I think is just a fabulous experience for all the kids. So I was just really impressed. And I don't want to minimize all the other classes I went to, but that was unique for me. So I also hit Granite Bay, and we chatted, had quite a long conversation about their English learner students, and then we didn't actually get to any of the classrooms. So I'm going to go back so I can actually get into the classroom, because they have far fewer English learner students, and I was just curious how they managed to meet all of their needs versus, say, Antelope, who has just so many more, so we get more resources. So that was an interesting conversation. And best part of my day-to-day was Cupcake Wars over at Oakmont. I'm eminently qualified, and there was just so much creativity in the visual and tasting experience. So I was back. So thanks.
Well, I had a very couple of weeks due to a crazy work schedule, but I did get to participate in the Cupcake Wars, which was fantastic. The kids were so creative, and they have to do a backdrop with scenery. One of my favorite parts, aside from the obvious of tasting the cupcakes, is that the culinary teacher actually had piped in a playlist, and so I still have Gwen Stefani's "The Sweet Escape" in my head, because every song was like something about sugar or sweet lips like sugar, all these sweet themed songs, and so I just love that little extra attention to detail. So it was a lot of fun. I will be back next year.
Okay, I had a couple of visits. I was able to visit Oakmont High School, which I always enjoy visiting with Principal Boljan. He took me to several IB classes, including IB dance, which I did not realize was really interesting to learn about IB dance. And then we also walked potential facilities updates around Oakmont and the Oakmont campus. And then an Antelope High School visit, I got there right in time to sit in for the last 30 minutes of a counselor. Principal Cutts was sitting around the table with all of the school counselors. And wow, that was an eye-opener for me. So fascinating to hear how they were going about planning for next year and planning that master plan and students and new programs and teachers. And it was really, really fascinating for me. And then we also toured a CTE engineering class, and the students shared their hydroponic projects. And I think we should have a spaghetti feed, because they were all growing basil and oregano and lettuce and all the things for a spaghetti feed. And then I also met with Elisa Fong, who's a trustee in Roseville City School District, and we talked about how we can connect our districts, our feeder districts, I like the word she used for warm handoffs between our elementary school district into our high school district. So that was a really good visit, and I look forward to regular communication with all of our feeder districts.
Well, I spent most of my time since last meeting on vacation, but I did get out to Roseville High School yesterday for the Placer County High School Voter Education Outreach Program, which I think is probably one of the best external programs we bring to our campuses. I know the kids, they walk in not very interested, and they walk out really engaged and interested, and it's really, it's heartwarming to see how much they care about so many different issues and the discussions that come up between the partisan representatives that are there and nonpartisan representatives, and the engagement with the county staff. And best of all, many of the students leave pre-registered as new voters for when they turn 18. So I think it's a great program that I encourage all of our sites to continue to participate in because I think it's great for their students.
Right, we're gonna go back down then to our student board representatives for your reports.
My name is Peyton Gomez, and I'm representing Oakmont. Our recent events, we had 2 community outreach events. We had our successful Ike Rally, which we put on at Ike Middle School, and we also had 8th grade showcase night, which involved a rally, an assembly, and parents to go and see our different pathways. We had our city's rally, Spirit Week, and dance in February, which was Valentine's Day themed, so it kind of like moved on campus. We had our first lip sync battle in 7 years, which was very fun. We had our admin come out and staff do a performance, which was fun to tie in students and staff. We had Culture Fest last week, which included lunchtime activities representing different cultures with different foods. We also had a rally and a Heritage Spirit Day that day, where we encouraged students to show off their cultural backgrounds. We have our Boys and Girls State nominees. Thank you to the American Legion for donating money to send off an extra student. This actually includes myself and another student named Peyton Henry. And then we also, like you guys mentioned, had our culinary cupcake wars, which is one of our various CTE pathways. Upcoming, we have midterms this Thursday and Friday. We have CASP and CAS testing this month and the beginning of next month. Our student government elections are next week. We have the Prom Spirit Week rally and dance at the beginning of April. We're starting to plan Powder Puff, and we have LCAP on March 19th, and our spring sports are going on. Hi, I'm Bella. I'm from Granite Bay, and well, our sports have been doing really well this season as the winter sports season has closed. Our girls varsity soccer won D2 North California championships, so that is really exciting for our girls. And then Levi Bussey, who is a senior in Granite Bay, won the state championship for wrestling, so a big congratulations to him. We're very proud of him. And upcoming, we have midterms, pretty normal. Our students are working hard to study. Our future Grizzly night is next week, so we're really excited to welcome the 8th graders, and I'll be working a booth to hopefully get them interested in student government, so that's really fun. Our junior prom is also next week, and I know our juniors are really excited for that. And our school musical opens March 27th, so I know our theater program has been working really hard, and their set looks really good, so I'm really excited to see it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. On to the superintendent report.
All right, yeah, just same thing with Granite Bay with Levi and the girls soccer team. Congratulations to them. Being a state champion in wrestling, especially at 190 pounds, I mean, that's a gauntlet that no one should have to go through, and to win that is really, really impressive. And then obviously the girls soccer team. I was meant to be there because I was going to give out the awards for it, and unfortunately with my injury I couldn't, but my family got to hear me scream when they scored their late game-winning goal towards the end, so that was a lot of fun. And being a part of CIF, those were 2 CIF events, so it's nice to have one of our schools representing and doing so well in that. Then the other two got to attend the Community Leaders Breakfast with Chief Bergstrom over at Roseville Police Department last week, and having tabletop conversations on our city and all the things we do, and it's just a great relationship with the Roseville Police Department and our organizations, especially the school districts. Got to see our SRO leads, and it's just a great relationship, and I can't thank them enough for what they provide to us. And then lastly, I got invited by Jan Penny, one of our former board members, to the Founding Forward dinner last Saturday to hear our very own Brandon Del Ordo do the keynote speech. He might still be speaking, actually. We all left. It was about 25 minutes, and he had room to spare. But he did tell them, I'm a history teacher, and you asked me to talk about history, so enjoy your dinner, I'm going to just start talking. But he did a great job of just kind of capturing the political environment without taking a political position. And if anybody knows Brandon, he can do that very eloquently. He shared his childhood and just what it was like in terms of that. So it was just a great speech. He did us very proud as a district, and glad he's not here, so we won't inflate his head with that. But half the room probably had him as a teacher, and they had kids in there that were getting awards, and so it aged him a bit too. But Brandon represented us very, very well as the keynote speaker at a packed house dinner last Saturday. So.
All right, thank you. Committee reports. We did have the policy meeting.
Yes, I have a nice long report for you. Board Policy Committee met on June 26th. We meet here in the district office now. And we met for, I lost track of time, but I know it was over 2 hours, reviewing and discussing quite a large number of board policies and administrative regulations. 6 of them relate to board bylaws and were presented by our superintendent, John. 15 were related to both board policies and administrative regulations. Related to business services presented by Joe, 25 related to HR by Brad, 12 related to education services presented by 2, and 13 related to student services presented by Mel. I think Marla enjoyed her first really long policy committee meeting. Hopefully it was helpful to learn the pain we go through in those meetings. These policies, particularly this batch, it's a large batch, but virtually all of them represent changes that are required to ensure our policies remain current and compliant, reflecting new court decisions. There were quite a few that were a result of court decisions, new laws, as well as some corrections for clarification, some minor edits to bring consistency across various policies and regulations, and to more clearly designate the roles and responsibilities of the administration. With Brad's, I know he always seems like he has a lot, but for each one he has, there's 3, and sometimes that's not always clear, so I thought I'd cover that. When we have a policy related to personnel, it has to be one policy for classified, unclassified, and administrative staff. So the same thing is basically repeated 3 times. Like I said, it's a pretty long list, but none of these changes represent any significant changes to board policies and the way the district operates. And just a reminder that we do have a board policy on board policies, and that is whenever we have significant new policies, or we've actually extended to where we have policies that are going to have significant changes to them. We generally bring those to the board for direction to give to staff prior to them crafting the policies, so they don't waste their time working on a policy direction that the board's not supportive of. So I think this long list shows that we need a policy committee and we probably should meet more often. I know we've had some difficulty getting our calendars together, but hopefully you guys support all the policy changes because we do a lot of work.
He said a lot more than I was saying.
Okay, perfect. RSEA report is next. And now the report is back.
This is your last one.
to do a report, but then I realized is that you guys are just like our students, and you were empowered by food. From crab feed to cupcake board basil with PE left hanging. I was like, don't worry, okay, there we go. Friday's pie day, so come on over. I just want to address that, as many that they've said, is midterms right now. I also wanted to recognize is how much effort is going into CAS testing that are coming later this month. And if you want to look at a very intricate detail, go to any site and figure out all the moving parts and the emails we get, and you're going to be here moving this. And so I want to say, like, the amount of effort that's been out there, I want to give gratitude to all the teachers and staff and administration that we have put a numerous amount of work into this. And here we go.
Thank you for mentioning Pie Day. It's my favorite holiday. Not just because, as you can tell, I like to eat pie, but the number pi is the most famous constant in the world. So it can't be.
All right, I get you. Okay. 4.7, public comment. We don't have any comments. Okay. Well, then we will move right along to item 5, which is our consent agenda.
I wanted to pull a couple things up. Sorry.
All right, what would you like to pull?
I wanted to pull off 5.4, which were all of those bylaws. I really just want to talk about a couple of them briefly and then just maybe share a couple comments on it. So I don't know if we can just pull the whole thing off, but I'm not anticipating going through each one. And then,
Normally we just pull the ones that we're discussing.
okay. 13.2.4, no, 1312.4 AR and 3517 AR. And then I want to pull 5.7, the approval of Granite Bay High School Special Ed Restroom Changing Area, and 5.13, approval of K-12 Strong Workforce Program Grant application.
Sorry.
5.4, those two that I mentioned, and then 5.7 and 5.13.
I'm sorry, so 13, 12.
Go back to 5.4, which one?
In 5.4.
1312.4 AR and 3517 AR.
Thank you.
And 5.7 and 5.9.
I got it. Yes, you.
Make a motion to approve the ballot.
I'll second it, and with a comment, just thank you to the Martland and Pete for the work on the committee. It was a lot of policies this time around, but thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the remaining, and we will do a roll call vote on those. So trustee Constant?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
And student board? Yes. All right, all those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? All right, so we'll take then the 5.4, item number 1, 1312.4 here.
Okay. And just in general, and I'd already shared this with John today, he got my panicked email. So, but thank you, Pete, for your update on the policies. I really, as a board member, felt a lot of responsibility when I saw 55 to 66, depending on how you wanted to count policies, come before me. And I feel like I would like more time to adequately review, so maybe take those future batches in a smaller, compartmentalized to come to the board meeting. I appreciate all the work that you do, and thank you for the update, because that helps me to have confidence, but I really feel that I need to review those, and I could do that in smaller chunks.
Can I ask, just for clarification, these have been out since February 21st, so 3 weeks is a long time.
You are correct. I could have done a better job at being aware that I needed to look at them, so that is true. I can do a better job.
Because sometimes we come through with even more than this. Like we've had times where we've had pages and pages because we'll get, well, we went through all however many thousands that we have in one batch at one time, so.
Is it possible though to, and I agree, I can absolutely do that. That would be an improvement that I could make for myself. Is it possible to present them though in smaller chunks over the board meetings that come after the committee meeting?
I don't think that's wise, given that many of them were required to stay current with law and with court cases. And by the time some of these get to us, they've already gone through probably a 6-month process at CSBA, and then they get distributed, and they go through a process, here. Sometimes we're a year behind the law. And so I think it's important that we, and I know it's a lot of reading, and I've been on this committee now 5 years. And like I said, we've probably gone through, I know we've gone through every policy, at least on some we've gone through every single year. But that's why we put them out. That's why the committee does it, is to take a big chunk of the workload and to make them publicly accessible for all members of the public, parents, teachers, staff, everybody. And oftentimes it's even more than 3 weeks. This, I think, was one of our closer committees.
So let me ask you a question. So I think our meeting was February 26th, but we made some slight changes. So you're reviewing the board policy. You don't want to reviewing anything until after they've updated the changes from, I don't know why I can't speak, the changes from the board policy committee. So my question would be, when did they get updated to the draft agenda? Which might be a question for John or Kim. Yeah.
So is what we do is we do the BPRC. I do write up minutes. They are not posted, but they're available for your review. And I usually do those either that day or the day after. So they're there to see what changes were made during the BPRC, what is going forward, what is not going forward. I think there were like 6 that were affected. The drafts get updated by the assistant superintendents. Those drafts go on to the next agenda that we're going to, like today, that we're going to review. So the drafts are changed according to BPRC, and everything else is put on. Then after you guys vote on, like today, if you were to vote on all of them, then the next 2 weeks, literally takes 2 weeks at least, we will update them and then post them to the assembly for our current policy.
So a board member could read the
Correct.
same board policies that we reviewed and then take your
And
notes.
you can look at the minutes.
Okay, minutes.
Correct.
Okay, so.
And
maybe we
the
just
draft
need to help-
agenda is out for the public agenda that we all have access to.
Right, so maybe we just need to help the other board members.
Right, and I think that we get to, after we get through that process, even if it's just a reminder email, hey, they're out there.
Yes.
Just from the busy lives everyone has, hey, they're out there, start reviewing them.
Or we distribute the minutes as soon as they're ready to go.
So that might help.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate everybody hearing what it's important to me to look over those and review them. So thank you, and I'll do better myself in the future as well. And also, don't skip any more board policy review committee meetings. Or I didn't say skip. Don't, well, there was a couple that got missed at the end of last year. Isn't that why they
Well, we didn't
piled
know,
up?
we didn't know who was going to be on the committee.
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah.
Well,
We'll do better.
I can do better. Okay, so, I just wanted, when I looked at 13.12.4 AR and the 3517 AR, those are both connected. And so for me, as a community member, I felt like there was one specific change in there that might create some concern in the community. So I just was hoping, it looks like Rob is going to address that to let us know what that law was and what we've already done in our campuses and what changes we might see in the future because of this law.
Just to be clear, are you speaking about the changes to the residential?
Yes, that is the specific, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that was based off of an assembly bills. It's actually Senate Bill 760. And what it requires is that we have at least one gender-neutral restroom on all of our campuses if we have open a male and a female restroom. We have to have at least one on our campuses. And so, yes, you're right, there are some connections, and Joe and I have had some conversations, and we'll be working on this moving forward to determine whether or not what we currently have in place, which is on a lot of our campuses, our transgender students would have access to the nurse's restroom. And so they have access to that restroom, which is a gender-neutral restroom. And so we're looking at that to determine, will that qualify, does that meet standard, or do we need to do anything where we need to retrofit or change one of the current or existing restrooms that's there and maybe turn it into a gender-neutral restroom.
Okay. And this is all because it's law, and then I felt like I saw that there was going to be more written notification outside of these restrooms, and just so when the public goes and sees that they're not, that's part of the law as well, that it's.
It has to be posted on the outside of the restroom, and so that may be more of the other board policy, but my understanding is that, yes, it has to be very clear that this is available for students and it's a gender-neutral restroom.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to it's very short, but I just thought for public information so they can see.
Yeah, I agree.
So for me, I would say go ahead and make a motion to approve 1312.4 AR, 3517 AR.
I'll second that.
And do we have to do a roll call vote? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, approved 5-0. Oh, and our students. Yeah, did you guys say?
Aye.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I heard it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so then we will take item 5.7.
So this question, oh,
Wait,
no.
question.
So this was the approval of Grand Bay High School special ed restroom and changing area. And so my questions for Joe were, how does this project work into our larger facilities plan? Does it affect it in any way? And why are we, what has brought this project to the surface right now? And will we need to do this for all schools? This is a, will we be looking at a similar project on all schools?
Okay. So due to the cost, we don't feel that this is going to have a significant impact on our facility plans, being a $400,000 project. We also have some students that are in need of these services at Grand Bay High School that kind of brought this to our attention so that we could address the issue so we don't have issues that could lead to lawsuits or other problems in the future. We have a similar facility at all of our other sites. I think Grand Bay was probably in the worst shape for having these type of services available to students. And so we felt it made sense to address this issue so that we could serve our kids there at Grand Bay High School.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate that. So I would make a motion to approve item 5.7.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, all those opposed? All right, approved 5-0 plus our 2 student board members, and we will take item 5.13.
5.13 is the approval of the K-12 Strong Workforce Program grant application, and my questions to 2 on this were, do we have any unusual obligations that would stand out? What happens when this grant funding ends, and how much time will this grant give us to try the mechatronics program?
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. So first part of your question is, what are our obligations? Our obligation is to meet the exact language for which we will be awarded, should we be awarded. There are 2 parts. The first part, which you referred, is the Oakmont Mechatronics pathway that we will be expanding at Oakmont. As you will recall, we received a prior grant to build that mechatronics pathway. Should we receive these funds, it'll give us an additional 30 months or almost 3 years worth of funds to support the expansion of that pathway for a total of 3 years. The second part of this grant actually references really a communication as well as outreach strategy for increasing pathway completion with our families. And that's an intention that our district office, as well as specifically CTE and Ed Services, have really been trying to do a better job of, is communicate with our students and families what being a CTE completer means for them, not only as a high schooler, but post-high school years, post-secondary space. Your second part of the question with regards to what will happen when the funds run out. So because this is a 30 months or almost 3 years award, we would then, of course, study the viability of mechatronics and if that is indeed generating the interest from our kids to keep it. Should we decide to keep it, we would then, of course, absorb the singular one staffing member into our funding and into our general staffing funding formula for Oakmont, at which point, of course, that's our commitment to our kids and our families. And then your third part of the question, what was it again, Tiffany?
I actually think you covered them all.
Okay.
You did. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. So with that, I will make a motion to approve 5.13.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second from Marla. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, we are passed 5-0 and 2 student board members. All right, now on to the excitement. We've got a big action matters section tonight. It's like the Joe show for the second meeting in a row. So we'll start with 6.1, our second financial report with Mr. Landon.
All right. Since we have some other big items today, I'm actually going to go through the financials a little quicker than normal, which I feel like I normally go through pretty quick, but feel free to ask questions, or if there's anything else that you want me to go through, I can do as well, but just wanted to front load with that. So this is our second interim update, and so this is as of January 31st. We stopped looking at the financials and really update our budget. We usually don't have a ton of changes at this time because we just did our first interim as of in December. I made that presentation, so it's only been a few months, and so there's not a ton of changes that we have tonight, but we're constantly looking at our budget, making updates. And we're also entering into, we've been doing all our budget meetings for next year. It's that weird time where we're working on current year, but also really looking at next year. And so through that process, budget meetings, we also find savings within the current year that we'll figure out and present to the board with our adopted budget. So overall, the adopted budget was planned to have deficit funding this year. A lot of that is the categoricals, the movement of the money. And so I'm going to show you where this looks later, but for the current year, we are projected to start at minus 12.2 deficit, and now we're projecting 14.7. Sounds really bad, but actually when you look at the multi-year and the way the numbers look, it's actually, we're in really good shape. So these are the exact areas of changes that we identified. So in the first interim, we had a number of items there. We have additional ones that are shown here, nothing too significant, but I will say special ed is always one of those ones that both on the revenue side and the expenses side, it tends to jump up and down. And so, so you see on the revenue side, we have an increase of $300,000, but then when you move over to the expense side, we actually have an increase in expense when you look at the SELPA bill back. That's the SELPA through the county that we work through. That depends on how many kids are in that program, those programs, and how much the program costs and what our share is. So one item I'll also point out on the expense side is the textbook expenses. I'm projecting now an increase of $200,000, but we actually are projecting a larger savings next year. We kind of move forward some of our textbook expenses, and then we're actually going to save even have less than $200,000 in savings for next year. So while for this year it looks like we're spending more, when you look at it over 2 years, we're actually spending a bit less. So once again, that 14.7, I'll show you that here. So if you look at the very bottom at our adopted budget, we're projecting an ending fund balance of $15 million. Despite now going a $14 million deficit, we actually have a projected ending fund balance of $17.3 million. So that's where it can kind of be confusing. It looks like we're spending a lot more and we should be in worse shape, but because of the carryovers and the savings from when we closed the budget, we actually are in better shape than we were than when we adopted our budget. I feel like the best way to look at our budget is in the multi-year projection, which you every time I give the budget, I share this. This is what I shared with the board back in December as of October 31st. So I like to really look at that 25, 26 and the 26, 27 year. I feel like they're a little more clean years and they take away some of the one-time money. So when you look at that yellow line in the bottom, you see next year we're projecting a deficit of 1.2, and that third year out, 26, 27, we're projecting a surplus of 2.4. Then I also like to look at that bottom yellow line and really the very, very bottom line, that percentage, where currently this year we're projecting the ending fund balance of 9.7%. That's a key number because we're required by the state, if the reserve cap is implemented, which actually this year it isn't, but many years it is, we need to be under 10%. And so that's kind of a target. We like to be around that 10%, maybe a little under. We don't like to get too far under, but we know that because of the reserve cap, we all often are wanting to make sure we're under that 10%. Above that yellow line, you see all the reserves that the board has, the 3% board reserve, the 3% state reserve. After all our reserves, when you look at that bottom yellow line, that's kind of what we have left. That's not even designated for anything. So this was back in October 31st. Going forward, one more, this is my latest update. And you'll actually see the numbers are quite a bit lower in that very bottom yellow line. The reason for that is I put in projections for potential salary increases next year. We haven't gone through negotiations yet, but we wanted to start accounting for that so we had a best look where we think we may end up and what our financials look like after that happens. So we always want to make sure that bottom line is positive. And then we also, when we look at that third year out, 26, 27, we want to make sure we're at a surplus. And so right now we're projecting a $1 million surplus in that third year. So those are targets that we always look for in our financials. All that we talked about was just the general fund. These are the other funds in our district. So we have our adult fund, our cafeteria fund, and facility funds. One thing I'll point out, the one that looks really low is adult fund is projected ending fund balance of 0. We actually had budget meetings. We're projecting that's probably going to be a few $100,000 because some of the local other adult schools were just closing, and we're going to get actually more money than we projected. And so we haven't had a chance to flush out the exact dollar amounts, but we're going to be in much better shape than having no ending fund balance in the adult ed program. The other one I like to point out is because of the last couple of years we've been putting money in our pension reserve trust. That's Fund 17. You'll see that balance is up to $5.1 million, which is pretty exciting. When you go back to this slide, we have about $5.8 million in board reserve, 5.8 in state reserve, and that 5.1 is all on top of this. So we're in really good shape. Having those reserves as well as having that pension reserve trust of $5.1 million, which enables us to, if we have additional increased pension costs, then we can kind of weather that storm and we have that money. And we're making really good interest on that money as well, which is really nice. And lastly, these two are our developer fees. We're projected to have a pretty good ending balance of almost $27 million. We just built this building. We've got expenditures coming from Roseville and many other things. So there's always a lot of money coming in and out of our Fund 25 So went through it quick, as I said. Some of the upcoming next steps, like I said earlier, doing budget development. We're actually nearly done with most of our meetings, so we're starting to now do all the accounting stuff, get the numbers together. That's going to come to the board in May as our public hearing, May 27th. Also early May is when the governor's May revise comes out. That's when we get the latest update on what the state budget looks like. But May 27th, we'll be doing our public hearing and our draft budget, and then bringing in June 10th, our final adopted budget. And then as accountants, we're always working 2 years, and so not until September 9th is when we're ready to close out the current year's books. So that's just kind of give you a snapshot of what's coming. So I know I went through it quick, so please let me know if you have any questions or thoughts.
Just a quick comment and a question. As you know, I'm a big fan of the pension reserve fund, and I think it's great that we have $5 million, but I also think it's important for us to always talk about what that $5 million represents in context of what the net pension liability is. I don't remember that number off the top of my head, but is it safe to say that's only about 3% of our net pension liability or somewhere?
Yeah, it was around 160 million, something like that.
Yeah, so I I know it always seems great that we have 5 million, and I'm thrilled that we have 5 million, but it really should be 115 million, so I just want to keep discipline that we're going to keep putting to that, because just a reminder, net pension liability is the liability we have based on the promises we've made to our employees for benefits they've already accrued, assuming that every future assumption that we've made in calculating those and all future payments are made as expected. So it's not like what happens if we were just to pay off our liabilities today. Everything has to go right for us to keep that number at 150 million, and we've seen over the last 5 years quite a significant increase in that. So I just try to bring that up every time we do this, because I'm always optimistic that we have so much reserves, and I love having the healthy reserves, but in the big picture, we're still only about 3% of what we need for that one bucket. Thanks.
December pension committee. Right, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Joe. Any other motion?
Like motion approved.
I'll second. Thank you, Joe.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Board members? Anyone opposed? All right, we are unanimously passed on 6.1. And we'll move on to 6.2, which is a resolution 2505 in relation to Prop 2.
Yes, that's me again. So I'm here for the next 5 or 6, so I'll probably just stay up here, get comfortable. For 6.2, recently there was a bill passed that required schools to have a master plan when they're submitting for state reimbursement, state matching funds. And so the state has yet to come out with the details of what's required in that master plan. We do a lot of master planning for all of our projects. We try to make sure before we spend millions of dollars, it kind of goes in with the theme of what the board and the district is trying to do. So that's a lot of what we do, but this is a resolution as some of these upcoming projects we're planning to pursue state matching, and so a requirement is that we pass this resolution saying we know about this new law, and once you give us the details of what's required in the master plan, we'll make sure we follow the law and we have a master plan that adheres to the law. So this is just a resolution saying we recognize that and allows us to continue to pursue state matching funds for future projects.
Any questions, comments?
Motion approved.
I'll second.
All right, and then we'll go roll call vote on this one. Trustee Constant?
Yep.
Yes.
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 Trustee Sheets?
Yes.
And our student board members?
Yes.
2 yeses. All right, we have a unanimous 5-0 vote on resolution 25 plus our 2 student board members. And we're going to move to 6.3, also with Mr. Landon.
Yes. So before, I wanted to mention a little bit as I start to enter into some of these facility conversations, just the direction we got from the board a few years ago, really focusing on Oakmont and Roosevelt High School. For a number of things, we've been looking at them in regards to transfers, as regards to the maintenance services provided. There are 2 oldest sites. And so part of the direction, we are looking at is improving the facilities and updating them. So I'm excited to be sometime in the next month or so, we'll be reaching out to the board to let you know about a groundbreaking at Roosevelt High School. That project is getting ready to start, and so we're really excited for that big project at Roosevelt High School. And this is the start of the big Oakmont project. And so staff wants to start having discussions with an architect so that we can make the plans. We know that we need to get a pool there because the pool is on its last legs, and so that's a high priority, something we've been targeting for some time, but we also want to upgrade and modernize some of that campus. And so part of that process is getting an architect on board so that they can work through what are the highest priorities, what's the biggest bang for our buck, and we can start working with the site, staff, administration, and figure out what we're going to do moving forward. So the point of this is to authorize us to solicit architect and get a design services so we can start having these conversations. We have initial budgets I put in here for these projects, but those are just kind of to get us started. We'll then later, when we figure out how much does it cost and when we want to do X, Y, and Z, and then we'll discuss in cabinet and eventually come back to the board with, this is what we think we want to do, this is how much money we have, and get approval going forward with that. So right now, this is asking for authorization to start that process at Oakmont High School.
I have a question. Are we able to do it in phases, meaning getting the pool done first? I know we talked about maybe even starting this summer. I heard you say it once. I don't know if it's possible, but I should say it.
Scott is here. Yeah. No, we're not going to be able to start the pool this summer. We potentially in phases. We'll go through with the architect, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. We have phased-in projects. Roseville High School, we're currently phasing that in. So we're starting the pool first, and then it depends on how we go through with DSA. And sometimes it's like parking, and you got, especially on an existing campus, you have a lot of logistics to work around. And so that's where the architect. But it's a high priority, but it's slow. Going through the division of state architect with the state takes some time. So my hope is to get this started and really start design work starting this summer, and then hopefully we'll be breaking ground on something in a year or so.
Fair enough, thank you.
Anyone else? Oh.
Thanks, Joe. Question, I know obviously whatever we end up deciding to do is going to come back and we'll talk about it. I assume that the facilities committee will engage like they have in the past to help pick what things look like and all that.
Yeah.
My interests are always around the finance side of things. When we're giving you the authorization to solicit leaseback proposals, but I assume that along the way we look at all the other financing proposals to evaluate what's the best bang for our buck and which way we want to go. So we're not putting you into a narrow field right here, right? We still have the ability to kind of look at everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we do.
Thanks.
And the architect, I think, will help us along the way as far as what's the best construction methodology for us to get the best deal as well.
Yeah, thanks. I learned a lot when we went through that process for
Yeah.
this building, and I just want to make sure we're not ever pigeonholing.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I make a motion that what are we doing here? Authorizing staff to develop and solicit leaseback proposals at Oakmont.
I will second.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Alrighty. Awesome. Anyone opposed? Okay. Well, we are 5-0 plus 2 student board members in favor of authorizing that proposals. What is that? Proposals for
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to 6.4 then, West Park High School.
Very similar of what we discussed before, wanting to start the process at West Park High School. We're already reaching capacity at West Park, so there's need for additional classroom space and also need to get a theater built there. And so I'm gonna be coming back with SBID. We talked about that, the financing, so I plan to bring that in April as far as the financing for this. But wanted to start that process, getting approval to get our architect on board and start working with West Park High School on what this project would look like. I know their administration has a lot of needs as far as classroom spaces. They need some bigger spaces to accommodate some CTE classrooms, art classrooms. They have a really big need for having a theater. As we saw, at Antelope High School when they were built, it took a while before we got a theater. And so not just for the performing arts, but also having a space where you can have a full class of students. And so right now, with the sizes of their classes increasing, I heard Becky's expecting potentially up to 700 freshmen, which is a little mind-boggling. And so having a big space where you can address your freshman class in a theater is a pretty big need at the site. So this, just like the Oakmont project, we'd like to start getting an architect on board and start having these conversations and start working in design, because some of the Oakmont project, it takes a long time before we finish the design, get DSA approval, and actually break ground. And by the time we get it built, we'll have a lot of students there who need these buildings. So staff recommends that we authorize us to design and look for proposals and start to do this work.
Any questions?
Just a comment, I know we talked about last meeting about the urgency of this, to get ahead of it, given that we're gonna reach capacity before we know it. So I'm all in favor of really getting the ball rolling on this one, and I think this is a great step towards that, helping us evaluate what we can feasibly do there once we get a better handle on our costs.
Ooh, Mr.
Trustee Johnson.
Do we ever, do combination bidding where we put all the bids out at once and say developers can bid on 1, 2, 3, or a combination of all for better pricing if we know that as an organization? Because we have 3 big projects that we're looking at.
We did for the snack bars, but that was kind of the same, pretty similar at each one. We typically haven't done that. These are both very big projects that are going to get a lot of interest. So when we have those smaller projects and we feel it makes it more attractive to combine them, it's worth it. But for these, I don't think so. But I'm not opposed to it. It's just, and the timing may not line up as well as far as going out to bid and getting those projects. But
I'll just say at another agency I worked with, we would do that selectively. We wouldn't do it on everything, because sometimes some of we know the big firms, sometimes they will be more aggressive in bidding when it's multiple projects, but that also brings some potential liabilities when you have a problem with the developer, builder, if you're having it at 2 locations. So it's just something to think about.
I'll definitely chat with Scott and we'll think about it. Because we have done it like we did with the snack bars, and so we've found ways that can work for certain projects.
Thanks.
I'll just add, I know that we're at the very beginning of this, and I see that we want to use a combination of developer fees and SFID proceeds, and I realize and acknowledge that West Park probably will take some combination. I just want to make sure that we don't become too dependent on the developer fees, because we need those for all the other schools that we can't use SFID for, so I just want to make sure that we're keep that in mind.
We probably will almost predominantly use SFID fees because, but state matching funds get delayed a couple of years. So let's say the project ends up being 70 million and we have 50 million in SFID. I think somewhere around that 15 to 20 million is likely our state matching funds, but those may be a couple years out. So we may have to use the developer fees up front, and then we get those reimbursed with the state matching, and then that money can be used for the other sites.
So if I can add, I think we have to be very careful when we do that, because developer fees are tied to growth, and in order to charge developer fees, the district had to do a nexus study, and it's under this concept that growth pays for itself. And so the nexus study is what gives the school district the ability to set and charge school impact fees. Once you've done that, the use of those fees has to be directly related to the impacts that come from the new development. So if we were to say, just randomly say, take a project at Granite Bay and pay for it with developer fees, we would not be able to make the nexus for that. Then that would put our use of those fees in legal jeopardy. So we have to be really careful. The law says it can be used to purchase land, build facilities, modernize equipment, improve infrastructure. It has a whole list, but then it says that occurs as a result of the growth, and it has to have a nexus. So I know you guys know that, but I just want to make sure that we're all conscious that we have to be really, really careful when it comes to these type of fees, because the collection and the use of are tied together legally, and we have to meet our obligations to the nexus study, to the taxpayers and the developers.
My only comment was just going to be that I was able to attend the play, Beauty and the Beast, over at West Park High School. I don't know if any of you guys were able to go to it. And the play was extraordinary, beautiful. They did a fantastic job, but there was a definite need for theater. And so I can understand and appreciate that that would be a pressing need that they have, and it would even make their plays all the more spectacular. So it's
Yeah, I'll make a motion to authorize staff to design and solicit leaseback proposals for a new classroom building in Performing Arts Theater at West Park.
Great, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, approved 5-0. And student board members, if you ever want to chime in with comments, and I don't see you, just like flag them down. Okay. Moving on to 6.5. 6.5, Wood Creek High School softball league.
Yes, another exciting facility project. So we had a lot of interesting and fun conversations last year about this project, and we've been working on the design. And Scott has been working with getting that design approved through DSA, and so we just went out to bid, and we got the 3 bidders you see. And so this was fairly close to our budget, so we had it planned approximately $2.4 million was our ballpark, and so a little bit higher, but not too much. But we were happy to see 3 bidders. We don't like it when we only get 1 bidder, because when we get multiple bidders, then we like, okay, it seems like we get a competitive bid. So staff recommends the approval and award of the contract to the low bid, which is Burco Constructors, at $2,512,000.
So I'd just like to say, during my visit to Wood Creek, I actually asked to see the empty field. So we went out in the golf cart and saw the great piece of land, but then from afar, you could see where the kids had to walk to the softball field. And I think we're doing the right thing, especially in the dark. The girls having to walk across the field. It'll be great. I was happy to see that. And also, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it with a comment, just because I just can't believe it cost $2.5 million to build 2 ball fields, flat ground with a couple of fences around them. I know I'm grumpy when it comes to these things, but I thought the restrooms were expensive, but this just drives me nuts. But we need to do it.
I'll just say I liked how you said that the bids were in the ballpark.
I'm glad someone.
I noted that.
But the price is definitely foul.
When Pete goes into retirement, baseball. Okay, so I believe that I heard first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. And we are moving right along. 6.6, potential phase 1, boundary adjustments with Mr. Landon.
Yes, the last part of the Joe Show. So thank you. We got this presentation. Wanted to keep moving us forward with some of the issues we've talked about at the last couple of meetings. And wanted to bring this for the board about some potential action items that the board could consider. So wanted to go back and reframe back to our attendance boundaries and some of the issues we have, predominantly with pretty rapid growth up the northwestern boundaries. You see under, today we're going to talk about 2 projects. One is the Placer 1 project, which you see in the north, that shows 5,636 planned units. And then a little bit of the Oakmont Island, as it was called, the blue square in the middle, where there's 112 units left to be constructed at the time of this. Most of the HP campus Oaks housing has already been built, but there are still some that are not yet sold yet. So let's move forward. Last time I brought this to you, which showed kind of the projections, the problem. Really I like to say the big problem we have is the West Park problem. What I also wanted to do is I added these colors, and I'm going to give you a little explanation because I often get the question, what is the capacity at this school or that school? And it's a good question to have, but it's a really difficult question to answer in my opinion, because the capacity is different for what it is to me or to John or to a principal or to anybody. There are a lot of factors that go into that. What about the capacity of the theater, as we talked about, the capacity of the cafeteria, how much food can we make for all those students, how can we manage it? And so I often try to give a little bit of a range CDE often has a number for us, but that is just basically just looking at classroom spaces and doesn't factor in a lot of the things that impact schools, especially high schools. So I went with these colors and I introduced it to cabinet. I was like, does this make sense? And I thought I would kind of go with it. And I think I had a board member who kind of asked me what it means. And they're pretty much, it's pretty self-explanatory, but yellow is warning. Orange is, okay, yellow, we're just keeping an eye on things. In my mind, orange, we're gonna have to make some decisions. I think of even at Antelope, even though we're yellow-orange, we made the decision recently to close Antelope to inter-district transfers. That number for Antelope, that's 1860 next year, that was originally projected around 1930, which was starting to give us worry. I know Lindsay Cutts, the principal, we're like, are we gonna have to start building portables? So we started with, we're gonna close off the inter-district transfers and buy us some time and see where those numbers go. But the numbers that I show here are kind of what we were originally projecting, assuming we open back up transfers. So you see in 28, 29 for Antelope, I put a red. Red to me is, as someone mentioned, I think Martha mentioned, panic, right? Maybe that's panic, or it's, we're in big trouble, what do we do, right? And so I thought this was a good way to look at it. The real, like I said, at Antelope, I think we have things we can do at Antelope, right? We can close the transfers. We've also had some initial conversations of building some portables. So, and you look even out to 2032, even though these are estimates, it starts going back down to 1907. So the Antelope problem is not something that concerns us too much, but currently the problem we've been discussing is the West Park problem, because we start getting really high in 28, 29, even 27, 28, and it just keeps getting higher. And so that's the problem we're looking at potentially addressing today. So I wanted to talk about those two developments and wanted to give you a little bit of a picture so you can visualize the project. Placer 1 development, this has been in talks for a number of years. It used to be called Placer Ranch. The focus of this project is that white area in the middle. It's a university parcel. This project was mainly focused and designed around a Sac State satellite campus. So the long-term vision is that it starts as a Sac State satellite campus. Many years down the road, it could be 20 years, 30 years, there's this potentially its own CSU campus. So there's the capacity to eventually make this I don't know what they call it, a Roseville State, CSU, Placer, whatever it is. But starting as a Sac State satellite campus, they're also working with Sierra College so there really is a focus on having a kind of a college atmosphere. And so initially Placer 1 was designed with very little housing. Since then, it's expanded, and there's quite a bit of housing, as you saw earlier, 5,600 homes. And so that's a lot of homes that we don't have the capacity to absorb at West Park. And so that's where we wanted to look at what are some possibilities for changing the boundary for Placer 1. The reason being, Placer 1, no one has moved in here yet. The reason I'm bringing it so quickly is they're going to be selling homes later this year. And so we thought it made sense to bring it to the board soon, because if we wanted to make a decision, we think it would make sense to make a decision sooner, so that when people buy the house, they know if we're not going to West Park, what school are we going to? One thing I will say is this plan where you go to all the development out in West Park High School was a big part of those projects. It was a big part of the selling point of those houses. It's the whole community. It's Kitchen 747. It's the whole neighborhood. It's called West Park. It's West Park High School. This development definitely has a different feel to it. So it isn't you go to the website, there's no mention of actually West Park High School. It is a lot of talk about Sac State, a lot of talk about this college campus, a number of things that they're building around there. So we do feel like could potentially be a consideration. So that's Placer 1. Also wanted to show you a little bit of the HB campus of this project. This is mostly built out. That whole right side of the map is all businesses. That was the Hewlett-Packard, but they've got a number of other businesses who bought a lot of the property. And that whole west side was sold off and is predominantly residential. But even in that north side, there's a lot of different some restaurants and some other buildings and stuff. So not a ton of houses compared to Placer 1, but definitely an impact. And it causes us an impact, which I'll show you in or go back to our graph really quick. And just that blue square being in the middle really is a it's non-contiguous, which is a problem, but it's a lot of transportation. And it's just, it's a challenge. And so that's why we thought it made sense to really look at that as well tonight. So I work with our demographer to kind of get an idea of how many kids are we talking about for both these projects over the next 6 or 7 years. I know when I talked with, I think it was Marla and Heidi, about, Placer 1, roughly around 500 kids over time. And you can see, once you get out to 2032, Placer 1 generates about 463 students. And I believe if you go further out, that number probably keeps going up a little bit. HB Campus Oaks master plan, mostly built out, even though those numbers are growing, there's a lot of younger families, so that's projecting them to kind of get to high school age. But I wouldn't project that to get much higher than that 168. So they're probably going to have somewhere around that 150 students being generated each year from that school. So we wanted to look at what we talked about earlier, which was the potential for Placer 1 moving from West Park to Roseville, and HB Campus Oaks moving from Oakmont to Wood Creek. Make it more contiguous, and really I went back with my colors to kind of show you what does that look like. It definitely doesn't solve all the problems. I don't think there's any solution that's going to solve all of our problems, but what you see is that those red numbers, when you look down the bottom for West Park, it definitely pushes it out further. So instead of 3,500 in 28-29, we don't look to be at 3,500 until 2031. And even then, it goes 35-25, 35-35. It seems like a lot of the growth is maybe already, maybe that's kind of reaching the max of what West Park would get to, which is still a bit higher than we're planning, but we're not 4,000 and going past it. And so, and it does create other problems potentially at Wood Creek and Roseville in the future. We think a lot of those could potentially be resolved. Some of the people on Placer 1, due to its distance from all of our schools, there may be a number of students who may choose to try to get into Lincoln or to Rockland, and they may pursue intra-district transfers. And so while those numbers look like 2,100, Roseville doesn't have capacity for 2,100 kids, we think it potentially wouldn't get that high. So we thought it made sense to have a conversation about it just because of the timing with Placer 1. I think I said it earlier, they're starting to construct their models in the next few months. And so we're looking at houses being sold later this year. So I did have some initial conversations with the developer, letting them know that we were going to discuss this because there was concern we didn't have capacity at West Park for their development. They were open to it. It didn't freak them out or anything. And so that was positive, and they actually really appreciated being brought in the loop that this could happen, so that way they would be prepared for it. So I also wanted to give you a quick look, if the board wanted to make both of these actions, what would our boundaries look like? I like the fact that it's at least contiguous. I mean, it's not a perfect, line squares, and that's why I also labeled this phase 1. I know there's been a lot of talk of other actions that I think would take a lot more study and a lot more time, and so that could be a phase 2 boundary adjustments. And so that's why I kind of labeled it a potential phase 1. So just wanted to give you an idea of what the map could look like. Definitely when you get far out west for Placer 1, that is a decent haul. I would say the majority of the growth in Placer 1, as I go back here, it's going to start in 1A, 1B, which that's pretty much the south end. And that right in the middle, I wish I had a little clicker, but that line right in the middle, that's actually Fittiman Road. So most of 1A is to the right of Fittiman, and you see those houses right below the 1A, those houses currently go to Roseville High School. The houses to the west and below go to West Park. And so the left part of 1A, there's some people they would probably hope to go to West Park, but really the majority of 1A and 1B, it's not that big of a change to go to Roseville when you have houses just south of you going to Roseville High School, which also makes the transportation more doable, right? We're already driving out here from Roseville for those homes in the Crocker Ranch area. The bigger issue would be down the road when you look at 2A and 2B, the houses there as you get a little further west. Those are further out in the project, probably 5 to 10 years away, whereas 1A, 1B, 1C, those are all the houses that they're going to be doing the first couple of years. Okay, I know I threw a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure I presented that information and give the board an opportunity for dialogue, questions. see where we go from there. But these are the potential action items I wanted to give the board an opportunity to consider, which would be adjusting the boundary for Placer 1 development from West Park to Roseville, and the HP Campus Oaks development from Oakmont to Liberty.
Go ahead, trustee Constant.
Thank you. Few comments. One, I'm glad this map is up because I think we have to be really conscious of the problems we've had in the past, like with Center School District. We draw a line right in the middle of a neighborhood, which is what this map does. Because the way these parcels were set up for development, the parcels don't align with main thoroughfares. So there's nothing on the map right now, but we're essentially gonna have developers, two different developers building houses in the same neighborhood where we may have a street that curves right through there, and we have houses next to each other, or even parcels that are divided by school district attendance boundaries. So if we're going to do this, I think we should move that upper left-hand corner boundary about 1,000, 1,500 feet over to Westbrook Avenue. Because we know no houses, but Westbrook's gonna be 6 lanes there with a center divider. We know that those are gonna be distinctly different neighborhoods. And I think we felt the pain of what happens when a neighborhood is torn apart, fighting about school district attendance areas. And sometimes it's really hard to see on a map, and I'm sure it was back then. But we know that street is there, and it's going to stay there, and it's not gonna move. So I think that's really important. So just from a structural standpoint, I think we have an obligation to consider that, and I think implement that as we go forward. Second, I think we should, I know this has been focused on Placer 1, and I know Amoroso is sort of the next frontier, but we should be considering, I know you have it in your demographic projections, but we should be considering is, if you go back to the I think it's the slide before this. The red, that one. The gold, the red, yellow, orange one right there. As we look out, I think before we make a final decision, we should look at what it looks like if either a portion of Amoroso, all of Amoroso, or Amoroso Ranch to the next major street, what would that do to these numbers? Because again, we know that's coming, and it is probably too much for Roseville if we do that, but it's also probably too little for West Park if we do that. So I think we just need to have that information to make a good decision. Third up, the Oakmont Island. I personally think that's a no-brainer. I'm still struck by the fact that previous boards didn't do that. I think we have to do that for a number of reasons, but I think we should go forward. And then, so my question now is process. So we're here today. Obviously, you're looking for some sort of direction, which way we're going to push you. But ultimately, what is our actual process if we were to say, yes, we want this, or we want some version of this? What are the steps that we legally must take? And what does that look like?
Yeah, to answer that question, so the steps would be, if the board took action today, is out work with the demographer, we'd update our maps, and we would notify the developers. We give will serve letters to developers and let them know what their attendance boundary. Placer 1, that was initially said, you're gonna go to West Park High School. We also have a caveat in there that says that's subject to change. And so one of the initial things would be to notify them of the change. The other would be to figure out the timing. And my projections, I proposed what would it look like beginning of 26, 27. You would want to do it with enough time. And so you just would work with our new communications officer to kind of make sure that that message gets out there and that people know. So really it's just But as far as working with the demographer, updating the website, all our school boundaries, and making it official,
Are we required to have a public hearing, or is it just a board action?
just gonna be a board action.
Okay,
Yes.
so I appreciate that. I'm in favor of us making this interim move, understanding that we still have the bigger issues to talk about and contemplate whether we're going to do other things, with the caveat that that line should be moved to the main street versus going through a neighborhood that we don't know what's gonna look like yet. So that's my input.
Can we split the discussion just and focus first on the faith, the classroom one, and then the HP? Because I don't want to lump them in together because I feel like they're different issues.
Yeah.
If that's fair.
Yes and no, because I actually think they do connect, but I want to hear what you have to say. So I'm not totally
Sure.
opposed to it.
My thought process is, I think, and I appreciate you bringing up what you did with the boundaries with phase one. I think that makes a lot of sense, that we need to be really cognizant of the major roads. And so good points. The reason why I think this is slightly different discussions is making the shift from classroom one, classroom one to Roseville. That's solving one particular problem. And I don't know any other alternative but to do that. The island, we'll call it the one island, but the HP, I feel like while ultimately we would likely decide to put that into Wood Creek, I think we have a discussion about transfers. And if you look at I pointed this out last time, and I think this was probably from a few board meetings ago, I have a printout of our projections without transfers. And so it's truly just the demographer saying, this is how many people live.
Residents.
Yes, this is just the residential units, and this is where everyone would go. And when you look at those numbers, Granite Bay and Wood Creek have the lowest number of students. But you put in all the transfers and suddenly they're way up. And so I hate to talk about changing boundary lines without a discussion about the transfers. Because when we change boundary lines, are we looking at after all the transfers, now we change the boundary lines? Or do we change it? If you change all the boundary lines, but then you allow the transfers, are we really solving a problem? So I just want to make sure we're not making a decision in silo with the HP area, even though we might ultimately do the same thing, but I think it's a bigger conversation. That's all. That's why I want to separate it.
That was a really good thought. I really appreciate both Pete and Margaret's comments. So I actually live right across the street from Campus Oaks, and a couple of thoughts that I had about this is over on the west side, I know in Roseville City School District, the boundaries were changed on families multiple times in very few years, and that's really hard on families. And so I am concerned about making a change for Campus Oaks. I don't want to change boundaries multiple times if we don't need to. And so I feel like maybe we need, and I feel like we're going to get there this year in a short amount of time. I'm not saying put it off for a long time, but I don't know that decision about Campus Oaks needs to be made right now with outside of the bigger discussion. I also wondered, could we take Campus Oaks and put it into Roseville High School? Right now, Campus Oaks, those students go to Roseville City School District schools, including Cooley, and the students at Cooley, they go to multiple high schools. They go to Roseville, they go to Wood Creek, and I think some of them go to West Park as well. So the students that are in Campus Oaks right now, they go to Cooley, but then they would still be with some other students that go to Roseville High School. If we moved, and that would still be contiguous with Roseville, and use the space that we have at Roseville High School, if we did that. And then the only thing, I mean, I don't know how that all works. I'm just thinking that's where we have Well, I think that we have room at Roseville and Oakmont. We need to use the facilities that we have. So how are we going to do that? And that might be one way to move them and then Placer One down to Wood Creek, although that doesn't help Wood Creek. But that was just another thought. I want to be careful about changing boundaries on families and flip-flopping in a short amount of time unless we need to. But I do like the idea of Campus Oaks either being part of Wood Creek High School or Roseville High School, so it's contiguous for the community that they're in and they're not just out on their own. A couple other questions that I had. I guess just thinking through, the only comprehensive high school that has room in the 2032, 2033 projections is Oakmont High School. So I'm thinking, what are we going to do to use this facility? And I feel like if we have any thought of actually potentially moving all of the boundaries west, then we need to have that larger discussion first. And I wondered, and I had asked you, Joe, if we can just place Placer One, just take it out of any designation, just say, you're gonna be going to some Roseville Joint Union High School District, but we're not gonna tell you exactly which one just yet. Those are some of my thoughts so far.
Yeah, I just, thanks for bringing up Wood Creek, because I had that note and I skipped over it. I think we could have Campus Oaks go to either school, not just Wood Creek. It could go to Roseville, although I do look at the long-term Roseville and Wood Creek both get read pretty quickly. I do think personally that Campus Oaks is more important to do first. And concurrently, because we have families right now with people going across town. And when we see Placer One development, first it's gonna unroll a little slower. Second, from my observations over the last 10 years, is the families that move in are primarily elementary school students, and it takes a while for them to matriculate up. So I think the impact of Placer One is gonna be slower on our high school impact. And I think the Campus Oak impact is literally instantaneous. And making a change now, we'll actually have families that start coming to our schools, proper schools, immediately. And they'll be still driving far, but less far than going to Oakmont. And I think it's, I do think it's important that we do it now. I don't like the idea of not doing something with Placer One, because what people fear is uncertainty. And I think the developers will be opposed to uncertainty. They want to be able to tell people. I think people who are buying homes, that's a big decision. I know I moved my family here for the schools. And as we moved, we looked at that, and that was a consideration. And when I bought my home in West Park, when it was the last development west, and they told me, we don't know what school your kids are gonna go to, I wouldn't bought my house. We just wouldn't have done it, because that's too much uncertainty for a family. So that would be my concern with that approach.
Quick comment, and it's really just kind of combining what the two of you are saying, because I agree 100% with what you're saying about the transfers. If we're changing lines, but then still allowing transfers unlimited, we've not accomplished much. And I was a little confused when I was first looking through the notes, because my concern was, well, if we eliminate Oakmont Island, then that's gonna really, impact Oakmont's numbers. So I was looking at that and worried about those numbers going down, only to see that they're not really affected, because all of those students are transferring anyway, for the most part. Mel can confirm or deny that, but that was the only conclusion I came up with. And so really, by changing the boundary, we're not really changing a whole lot, because I think many of those students are transferring to Wood Creek or Roseville High anyway. But that's not to say that we should ignore the transfer issue, but I do feel like that by just making the change now, it just makes it simpler for Mel.
Well,
and like that whole process.
When you say you
want to do it now. I'm saying, let's do it in 2 weeks. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
so I'm not trying.
Mine now wasn't tonight, it was
Okay.
like soon. But, and I forgot one important point I was gonna make about the transfers. I flip-flop on transfers because I don't like their impact. I don't like that some years you have families that have no opportunity for transfers, and then suddenly you have a cohort of families that have opportunities for transfers, and then somehow again you have a cohort of families that don't have an opportunity for transfers. And again, I just don't think in the broader sense that's really fair. But we have to realize that this district made a decision to offer distinctly different programs in our schools without going to an open enrollment magnet style. A lot of districts that choose to have specialty programs do that at each site, much like we have, and then open it up, and it's a competitive process where you go. We're kind of stuck in that middle. So if we close transfers, but then you live here and your son or daughter wants to be in mechatronics, or wants to be in culinary, or wants to be in this, or wants to be in that, then it's like, well, yeah, we're gonna do transfers for that, but we're not gonna do transfers for this. And then it's like, oh, well, okay, I'm gonna say my kid's gonna be in culinary, oh, they took their first class, they didn't like it, no longer in culinary. So we have those issues, and some of these are sort of self-inflicted because over the years we've done this. And then, on a completely different topic that I forgot to mention earlier too, one of the reasons I want to look at everything is because there's some things I think that could have a big impact on attendance that would be fairly easy. So if you look, you can go to, I don't know what page it is, yeah, that one's good. If we were looking at the whole district, we could change a lot of the imbalance between Wood Creek and Oakmont by simply moving the Vineyard Road border to baseline, which is a true arterial roadway where Vineyard is not. And that alone would shift over time, especially with the development coming in those areas, called infill development. That would bring Oakmont up, and it would bring Wood Creek down, and it would allow for some of these other things we're doing. And that's why whenever we were talking about this last couple of weeks ago, I wanted that holistic look, because now you're moving lots of parts and you're going through pain once versus the multiple changes. So I still think we should be doing that. I think we have opportunities like that if we decide to do this in a phased approach, we can do. And I think once we make changes, we're going to see more definitive impacts, and then we say, okay, well, maybe that is the right way, or maybe it's moving in the other direction. Whatever the case may be, we can start to do that. My only thing that I'm going to advocate over and over for is that we use solid arterial or big feeder roadways so that we don't disrupt neighborhoods like previous decisions.
So yeah, I definitely appreciate taking this all in. I know we and others have had more history with the maps and the boundaries and all that. Well, I know one reason why we got into this discussion was because of this ensuing problem. Everything we've talked about tonight has been leading up to how to kind of, what we can do now to address that capacity issue. And I think we identified these as two low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better word, of things that we could, they made sense for a lot of different reasons, some of which you went through in greater detail tonight. So I know I'm feeling the others may not be interested in moving forward tonight, but I would be in favor of going forward with both of these. I do really appreciate that for the Oakmont Island, we're calling it, that students, we're looking at 26, 27, but they'll have the ability to stay at Oakmont through graduation, which I'm sure families appreciate, or they can switch to Wood Creek sooner if they choose. And then also on the point of kind of these inter-district transfers, it sounds like we have flexibility of those. We can decide, or yes, let's implement no inter-district transfers to the site because of X reason, like we did with Antelope High. So I think those are things that we can work in as needed, and it's not something we have to decide today, but I appreciate taking in those factors. So I'm all in favor of kind of moving forward with both of these as soon as possible.
I just wanted to agree with Pete. I think share the concern. I know that with your plans to kind of improve Oakmont's campus, I think that there might be a little bit more justification for that as well, in offering more programs, I guess, so to speak. And I also do think when you're looking up there, just to the left of Oakmont's boundary, you can see there's a sliver that goes to baseline, but the rest of it doesn't. So I think that's also kind of interesting how it's cut off there. But yeah, I just have a kind of opinion on that, and I just wanted to express that as a student.
That is public record now, but
One person is with me, and she's from Oakmont, so that's even better.
I did, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna try to take a stab at a motion if you're ready for that.
Can I just say, well, if you
No,
want
go
to,
ahead.
I have been under the impression that these board meetings were giving us little pockets of information, leading to a much more comprehensive meeting. Like, we were gathering these pieces, and so I just feel that do we have a meeting planned where we're going to, a workshop where we can really hash this out around the table to a greater degree? I am concerned about just making little one-off changes without a larger picture and just saying, oh yeah, well, let's have, I see the reasoning of having Campus Oaks go to Wood Creek or Roseville, but we need to see that in a larger picture. I love what Pete is saying about the big roadways. That makes sense to me, but let's do it as a whole, and let's commit to doing it soon, not putting it off. That would be my recommendation.
I'll tie into that. I mean, one, this has a sense of urgency because the model homes go under construction in 2 months. This is going to take over a year to do attendance boundaries because you have to have you have to have community forums. This will be 100, 200 people every meeting when you get to that place. Joe can tell you he's got the playbook from the last time they did this, and there's still people with PTSD from the last time they did it. It's not a pleasant experience when you do boundary changes. And so this has urgency, which is the reason why it's brought right now. And yes, it will continue to build up, obviously, the facilities piece, the initial kind of what it would look like if we did boundaries. We'd be setting the framework. There's actually policy around what you do with attendance boundaries and how you promote it, the community input aspect of it. You got to create committees, and it's a daunting process, and usually takes about a year from start to finish. And so these have now issues. As Joe was telling me, we got the notification from KB Homes. Model homes go up in Placer 1 in 2 months. People will be living in there by December. And so that's where that notification has to come in. Then the rest of it can factor in, with all of that, and so that's the only reason why it's here tonight under action, is because this is it's kind of like the facilities, the SFID. These are the things that have to happen in a timely fashion. Then it does go into that next rest of the situation. And as you can tell, there's very few places you can really move anything. Joe and I have done boundary changes for about 6-7 years now, just to see what it would look like. And the west side's not the issue, it's the east side that's the issue, which is different, because we have declining enrollment on the east side. And then I'll just add one last thing to transfers. Transfer data has changed significantly because all of the west side is closed now, unless it's onesie-twosies like your parents teach at a school type situation. So that is going to look different over the next few years because it's been closed. Antelope, Wood Creek, and West Park are closed transfers right now. So that will be a culture shift, especially in Crocker Ranch, because our biggest worry now is how do we keep them in our district? Because Placer 1, you can go to Whitney High School, Western Sierra, 12 Bridges, it's a closer drive than any of our schools. And so we have that situation out there as well. And so, but that's why these determinations have to happen, and so we can get that out there and communicate what we're going to do so people don't move out there and choose elsewhere. Because we also don't want them to leave the district. And so, but I would just say we have the urgency now on these, then it leads into the next conversation, be it facilities or boundaries. How do we want to approach that? Would be the workshop of, we can bring in demographers, Joe can bring in what the policies look like, if there's legal that needs to come in, what would it look like from the start to finish process in determining that. So.
And I would just add, sorry, Joe, if you remember, I was arguing for a slowdown and a full, comprehensive, longer-term approach, but I felt like I had a clear message from the board that was what the board wanted to do, and so I do think that I am comfortable addressing the immediate concerns with a commitment to follow up with others. And so my motion, I'd like to state my motion because I think it may address some of those concerns. So I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to proceed with some amendments. The amendments being, number one, in the upper left-hand corner, ensuring that what would be a western boundary is along the main road, which is, I think it's Westbrook, out there, whatever that road is right there. That they return to us with an analysis of the Oakmont Island, what it would look like going to Roseville versus going to Wood Creek. And then further direction, that staff come back to us with a plan to look at other areas for boundary adjustments, along with what that would look like with the community engagement and other things that have been brought up to address things like potentially the vineyard baseline change. There needs to be some changes. We have some homes where people live way closer to Oakmont than they do Granite Bay. Take a look at all of those things, perhaps even that, I hate to say, the center school district little section that hooks in there by the Antelope Oakmont border, really taking a look at all those other things as an immediate phase 2. So that's kind of the outline of my motion. Correct.
So I might second that after I ask John a question. John, can you clarify, you said that there's a sense of urgency. Were you also speaking about a sense of urgency for the HP area? I was just trying to
Joe, if you want to add to that.
And I was before just gonna kind of, John was pretty much right on, and my preference would be to take that holistic approach that we kind of talked about, but these two ideas were kind of what we saw, and I think Bill mentioned it, like low-hanging fruit or low-pain-free decisions, because John and I in our 1000th go around of what we could do, I remember talking about that vineyard line. The difference is that could upset some families. That could be, not that we wouldn't do it, but I think that needs to go under that holistic, long-term boundary, looking at all those options, because we feel the Oakmont Island issue is kind of I don't think we're gonna upset anybody with that. That's gonna be people.
That's what I'm trying to get at, because we're making these statements that if we change boundaries, we have to have committees, and it take a year, and here we are talking about changing a boundary, but we're assuming that everyone will be happy with that. So
With these two, well, no one's there in Placer 1 currently, so they would, so that's the biggest urgency, but the Oakmont Island, I think, and the reason we picked Wood Creek is just, we added a bunch to Roseville, let's not add even more to Roseville, that's where we thought.
Yeah, and I'll add, Wood Creek has lived at 2,300 for well over a few decades, whereas Roseville at 2,000, it feels like 4,000.
Yeah.
We just put all that parking back and took all those portables out, you'd be right back into where are you gonna put the kids at 2,000 kids for that school. They're actually requesting to stay at about 16.
Yeah.
And so that's
2,000 is, 2,000 at Roseville is scarier than 22, like John said, 2,200, 2,300 at Wood Creek, just based on the campus, the layout, the supervision, it's a more difficult campus. So that was why the Oakmont Island decision was made, or proposal was going to Wood Creek, So, but I
We just need a before maybe there's a second clarification a little bit on the slivers that you're looking, of incorporating into this study before it comes back to the board. people living, their houses in there, that part that we would be moving over to Roosevelt right now?
There's houses in Amaroso, we've got friends that live over there right now.
I don't think there's any on that side of Wood Creek, or Westbrook. I haven't driven out there in a while, but that's all the way out by, the backside of Winding Creek is built, but I don't believe that area is, but that's something we could look at. But I think, I do think from the pain we went through, having any boundary within a neighborhood, it's got to go to one of the arterial roads.
I guess I'm having trouble seeing why that couldn't be a secondary decision, part of a larger study, where we're looking really at, in my eyes, really too simple. Despite, we're still gonna have to go through a process, there's still gonna be public hearing, there's the comments, there's gonna be a big year of dealing with this, or changing these boundaries, so it's not gonna be taken in a vacuum. But I guess I'm really concerned about, now we come back and we've got another couple of changes we gotta tweak to the map, and now all of a sudden we're in the middle of everything. So I'm really in favor of just really pushing forward with these two, with that second caveat, which is coming back with a bigger study, kind of looking at all of them together, the bigger picture stuff, long-term planning wise.
I feel very, very strongly about logical and physical boundaries. I mean, it's enshrined in law in pretty much every aspect of map drawing and district setting and everything else. It should have never been this way originally, and I think it just causes too many problems. So.
So I'm confused because when we say moving boundaries is gonna cause a lot of consternation, but we're talking about moving 3 boundaries. So I just don't understand the difference between these boundaries and the boundaries that are gonna cause consternation. To me, the consternation comes in flip-flopping for families and saying, you're here, oh no, 6 months later you're here, because now we've done the full study. So that's my concern. I agree that Campus Oaks is going to get pulled into one of those, but I don't see it as the answer to what we're looking at for the whole picture. And I just don't want to flip-flop on families. And like I said, I'm confused where we're saying, oh, some boundaries are fine to change, but then other boundaries are gonna take all of this study. So I'm not sure the difference between those.
I would say there's a couple differences. One is, I do think if we don't go to the main street, we are essentially gonna make that change twice, which is a sense of flip-flopping. But I think where the issues are when you have established neighborhoods where generations of families have gone to the same school and you make those changes, it's completely different than when you do it from a new neighborhood with new development. And there's I think we can clearly articulate why these changes are needed from a public interest perspective, from a school district perspective, from an individual site perspective. I don't think we can make that argument as easily when we're taking a chunk like between Baseline and Vineyard and moving it, or if we were to say on the other side over by Oakmont and Granite Bay, if you were going to move that boundary, I guarantee you that's going to have a completely different and much greater magnitude of public interest than moving something to keep a neighborhood together, or dealing with an area like Campus that's still developing and still has mostly the younger families in there. So those, I think, there is a significant difference. And having lived through this, and I know like the city school district went through this, but they were moving boundaries because they kept building new schools. They couldn't build schools quick enough. So like my particular street that I lived on, kids went to 5 different elementary schools over a period of 10 years. That wasn't because the boundaries were just changing because of board action. It was because development came and houses were built and then the school was built. And the next houses were built and the schools were built. And the kids followed that development pattern. Here, we're getting ahead of the development pattern, and I think that's important. And if the city school district done that, they wouldn't have a lot of problems that we have.
I just think of it as we're not making
larger workshop soon. I appreciate all these board meetings that we've had, but we have been talking about, are we going to have, because we keep saying, well, we've got a bigger issue that we need to address.
My
This
motion
isn't,
included that direction specifically.
You say a motion, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of dead now because it's been so long. But the motion,
Well, Kim has it, if you want to let Kim read it.
do you want to read it, or do you want me to restate it?
Go ahead and see what I missed.
Okay. Or you're gonna tell me what I missed. The direction to staff would be to proceed with the Placer One transfer, with the exception of making that western edge match the roadway boundary, the physical and natural boundary. And to look at the impacts of Oakmont Island going to either school or to both schools so that we can make a definitive decision which one we want to go, look at the long-term impacts of that. Because I think we see it for one school, we don't see it as clearly for the other. And then to follow up with staff bringing forward a work plan and a process for community engagement to look at other areas more holistically, giving the example of that one area and potentially others to look at it from a broader perspective.
so all we would really be doing tonight is designating Placer One as Roseville.
Yes.
From your motion, we're only designating Placer One as Roseville. The rest is still under.
The motion is sort of a three-phase approach. Placer One tonight, come back soon with Oakmont Island with the analysis so we can just compare option A, option B, and make a decision, and then come back with a holistic plan for community engagement for the whole district. Knowing that they'll actually implement Placer One in the Oakmont Island about the same time. Probably at the same time.
Okay, now I'm gonna come.
We really should get a second so we can discuss the motion, otherwise we'll be remaking motions. We can always amend the motion.
Well, I'll second it so we can have a conversation.
It just helps you process-wise.
Yes, I agree with everything except, so basically you're saying, let's say in 2 weeks, we're gonna come back and we'll decide whether HP is going to Wood Creek or Roseville. And I'm okay with that until what you said, shifting HP to Wood Creek, which is often a closed campus, will probably make families happy, but if we shift that to Roseville and then tell them they can't go to Wood Creek because it's a closed campus, now we have families who are upset about the change. And so as I'm thinking about what we might say in 2 weeks, but
Currently, though, they don't have any option to go to Wood Creek, so really, their option is to stay where they're going and
Okay,
go
that's a fair point.
to Oakmont, or to go,
that's fair.
we're not really giving them that third option.
Well,
If we wanted it.
But it's a limited option. It's like for those existing families who are there, they can finish high school at Oakmont or go to Wood Creek as of now, is the thought, right?
Yeah, but if you look Oakmont, the trajectory from Oakmont, it's not gonna be fully impacted, so that would be an option that would likely be open for at least a generation of students, maybe a couple generations. I don't know if you wanna bring that chart back up that shows the Oakmont, Oakmont never hits even yellow. So I think the option for students to go to IB, the other programs that we have is always gonna be there, or at least not always, but at least the next 8 to 10 years.
I don't mean to backtrack, but I just was able to look up the Amarusa site plan and try to get an idea. It doesn't, I'm pretty certain they haven't built any of the houses to the east of Westbrook. All the houses that have been built so far have been the west, but they do have that, you know, when you get to that little sliver, you can kind of see it here, right? So just to the left of that map, it's not like a long stretch, but there is some, the very north side, that like almost rectangle, there's some commercial, but there's some high density, low density, and the very bottom is actually mostly park space, but there are some houses that are planned there with the Amaruso plan, but it, as far as I can tell by looking at the map, it doesn't look like they've built those yet, so.
That's a different developer than,
Yeah, it's through the Amarusa Ranch, and this is where, well, it used to be called Placer Ranch, now it's Placer One, but it's different developers and home builders, so, and I can find it, I don't know the exact timing, I'm gonna have to look into that, but it seems.
I would hazard to guess that when that neighborhood gets developed, the two developers are gonna pick one home builder to build that neighborhood over both areas, because the way it's set up, it's almost impossible to separate that into two different neighborhoods, so I think you're gonna see a joint development project, much like you saw over in the area by our favorite center school district boundary.
Yeah, so it could very easily, they're gonna sell these to like the KB, the Pulte's, whoever, and so that 2A, 2B, even the 3C, those are years out, you know, for the Placer One development, so if those ones, it's likely.
What we do will likely influence those developers' decisions to bundle those parcels and build them.
Do we know Roseville City, which junior high that area will go to, Placer One area?
Cooley, I believe, right?
They're gonna be building another.
Yeah, so right now,
Okay.
the initial phase is they're gonna bus all the kids to, I think, Vetzel Brown and Catherine Gates for the first 4 or 5 years. Because there's no roads, there's no infrastructure where the elementary schools will be built, so those kids will be getting bused for a while. But it's very similar to the Fitterman Farms area, kind of where the blue is on the map up there. They all go down to Cooley, not to Chilton, but they circle back up to West Park, so it's already kind of all over the place.
You know, parents like their kids to go to school with their friends.
Yeah,
So
so-
I'm asking in the context of making.
Yeah, Cooley and Buljan have always been mass, they go to multiple schools, it's always kind of been that way. But there will be a new middle school, but it's probably 6, 7 years out, and so.
Yeah, the middle school, I don't remember exactly, but it's up in that 3, 2B area is where the middle school is zoned, and so it's, and they don't have the roads to get to that middle school towards the end of Placer One, so it's kind of, it's an issue for Roseville City as they figure out where to, I think currently it's Cooley, but they've been tackling, instead of 6 schools, they've got a lot more, so in some regards, they're just a little bit more challenging than ours.
Throw a tiny potential wrench into your motion, not a big one, but I believe that our March 25th meeting perhaps would be the workshop or
March 25th. Yeah, we have the Crystal Apple Awards, we have 3 teachers getting awarded that night.
I just want to make that clear.
And, you know, and I'm completely okay with coming back on the HB Campus Oaks, but I can give you a rough idea if you want the numbers are right here. So it's, you know, if you go out 2032, 168. So if you decided to move that from, right now we're talking about putting them in Wood Creek, if you move those to Roseville, take away 168 from Wood Creek, so that 2298 is gonna be 2150, 2140, and then your Roseville's not gonna be 2268.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, 2,000 at Roseville is like 3,000 at Roseville.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very difficult for them to accommodate that. Whereas Wood Creek has been at that number for a long time.
So what I'm hearing staff say is, capacity-wise, operational-wise, it's much better to go to Wood Creek than it would be. In that case, I would amend my motion and just take that part off, so that Oakmont Island would be a Wood Creek area.
Okay, I'll second that.
So just to summarize, the motion is, the motion as amended is to take the Placer One area with the addition of the sliver of land due north up to Westbrook, I believe is the name of that street, and assign that to Roseville Attendance Area, and to take the Oakmont Island, also known as Campus Oaks, and to assign that to Wood Creek, and then for staff to develop a plan, return to us with a plan for an overall holistic look at the district, looking for two things: opportunities to maximize the equalization of students at the various sites, and to identify a process to engage the residents that would be impacted by those types of changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, would you, just to clarify, that give you options on what the process, because I think there's a number of ways we could do that process. We could have attendance boundary, like, give you like, this is what other districts have done, and kind of give you some options of what that process could look like, maybe what we recommend.
I would like your recommendation with a couple of acceptable alternatives for the board to weigh.
And with all these options, talking about transfers, because again, our numbers are so different when you don't look at transfers. So I think we have to make that part of it. And we might find it just tweaking the transfer policy.
It'll be all inclusive. It will have transfers. It's going to be specialized, certain specialized programs and different things like that, because that's part of the transfer component to it. And then new data to show you what it looks like and the trends and patterns. But it'll be very comprehensive in adding all of that in.
Yeah, I think the motion contemplates a comprehensive plan.
And last thing, sorry, would the effective year be 26, 27 under your motion?
Yes.
Even though it's called out in the agenda, our motion's kind of varied a little bit from what was recommended, that, again, any students that were attending at Westmont Oaks would be grandfathered into Vermont.
Sort of the legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they'd have the option to switch to Wood Creek.
And then just to clarify, you're saying this little sliver of land, I wish I had like a really long arm. There, that little blue sliver, there are no homes.
As far as I can tell, what I can commit to is, I'm pretty sure there aren't, but 95% sure. If for some reason I found out there are a little neighborhood that wasn't updated on the map, I'll come back to the board.
I can tell you, I just recently drove down Sunset and there are no homes there.
Okay, I didn't think so, but
But double check.
I will double check, because part of this is to make sure it's as pain-free as possible. And if there were homes, I think that would be an issue, but I don't think it's.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second.
The most important part is to have the motion.
We got it all.
Okay. And it's not a roll call vote, is it? No. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay.
Well, was I was opposed. I was opposed. Do you want to know?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Student board members?
Your guys.
2 yeses, okay.
Well, I did just want to say thank you to everybody for your patience with this, and, as we talked about, there's a lot more to come, so.
Okay, we are looking forward to it.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Important conversations. Okay. Last thing on our action matters is item 6.7, approval of school plans for student achievement.
Yep, you have in front of you our revised school plans, which is typically our cadence. We have you approve our school plan, and then based upon the revisions as according to the carryovers of our funds, as well as the inclusion of some of our funds for dual enrollment, you have your comprehensive high school as well as your alternative high school school plans for approval this evening.
So I just wanted to say thank you, because I remember the first time we got these, the first time I got them as a board member, there were a lot of deficiencies in them, a lot of cut and paste errors, and none of those exist now. And I appreciate the work that has gone into these to not only standardize them, but individualize them. And that the graphs, the dashboard graphs match the tables, things like that. And I appreciate it, especially to the ones who actually did the work. So, thank you.
I also want to thank you two and principals that this is hours and hours and hours and months of work, and all of our site councils, that parents that put the time in to create this. I looked through everyone and really appreciated what I saw there, so thank you so much.
Thank you all, as always.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And we are on to staff reports. Staff reports or staff comments?
Tonight, you guys approved and gave permanent status to 33 certificated employees. That was done under consent, but it's important, yes, it's important to make sure that we recognize just the outstanding teachers and administrators and school nurses and ed specialists that we hired. And we have 37 that you moved from probationary year 1 to probationary year 2. In addition to 7 retirees that you accepted their resignation for retirement purposes. And also in the new hire, you'll meet him in probably later this year, Josh Mason, the new executive director of curriculum and instruction. So a lot of important moves this evening in terms of personnel, but I didn't want the permanent status to go unnoticed. The team here, it's real exciting, so thank you.
All right, next up, we have just our pending agenda items, and I don't want to dive in, but it was mentioned already that we won't meet on 3/25 because of the Crystal Awards. And we have some teachers we recognize that night, and then we will reconvene on April 8th. That's my son's 18th birthday. Very exciting.
The best place to be is here. We'll get cake and
And then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. All right, meeting is adjourned.
Yes, sir.